So this is sort of a project on a whim. I don't really have an order for one of these, but I found the pattern laying around. Thought, oh, I need to make some of those. Anyway, I've heard this called a shot shell slide, and it's basically just an ammunition carrier that holds 6 shotgun shells. In this case, 12 gauge shells, and it'll wrap around the belt and snap into place and hold the shells ready for use. There's not many pieces to it. There's just one main piece that's going to be what actually wraps around, and it has these little ears on it where we're going to set some snaps, and we'll set some snaps on this piece as well, and that'll be what actually holds it in place. And then otherwise you need 3 little pieces that I've already got cut here that are going to be for the loops to hold the shot shells, and this will hold 2 shot shells with each of these loops, so I've got 3 of them. And then you need a strip of really kind of heavy leather. This is about, I don't know, 10 or 11 ounce, and about 5/8 inches wide. And you need a strip of that as long as this is, which is, I believe, 8 inches long. Yeah, it's 8 inches long. So I'll need to cut a little bit off of that, but otherwise it's just about perfect for what I need. About 5/8 to 3/4 inch wide, whatever I had laying around in this case. It's just a stop so that the shot shells have something that they sit against when they're sitting in the loops, so that they don't fall all the way down in and the tops of them stick up a little bit. All right, otherwise, I've got most of my pieces here. We'll just trim this off. Knock the edges off of it, and we'll cut this piece out. And for that, I've just got another scrap of leather. I don't need anything really good to do this with. And this is also about, I'd say 9 to 10 ounce leather, so fairly heavy stuff. About like that. Punched up holes for snaps. Get a little bit of extra clearance there. Yeah, that's about where I thought it would be. I should probably mark on my pattern where these go, but it should be good enough. Alright, and now all it's got left is to stitch that piece on and stitch our belt loops on that are going to be for our mark where our belt loops are going to go for our cartridge loops. To do that, I am just marking some points This little piece that I have here that I'm using to lay these out is what I always use for cartridge loops in general. And this one's set up for a 12 gauge, but I've got a whole bunch of different sizes of them. But pretty much I'll make a cartridge loop using like a 12 gauge shell and a couple scraps of leather. And I'll make one that fits. I'll stitch one side, put the shell in there, get it all shaped, stitch the other side down, and then I cut it apart. And this is what I wind up with as far as the length of the part that went over top and the thickness of leather that I used. So that's why I'm laying it out that length. Now the width of it is, once I've cut it apart, the piece that I had it sewn onto underneath, I'll cut wherever those stitching lines were, or I'll measure wherever those stitching lines were, and that's how wide apart they are. So this is also for laying out the holes on something like this. So this side, turned this way, is the width that you need for those pieces, and for the part that's going to actually wrap up and over, you turn it this way, and it's that length. And in this case, for a 12 gauge shell, it winds up being right at 1 inch wide and about 2 1/8 inches long is what I've got here. And I just keep it marked 12 gauge loop, and whenever I need to lay them out on a belt or something, I've got it. I've also got them for 45s and 357s and 22s and 30/30s and a bunch of different sizes. But anyway, I was marking on this to see how many holes I wound up with across here, because I couldn't remember. And it looks like I've got 7 holes across here, which means on this piece I'm going to want 9 holes, because I want the 7 and then I want 1 on each side. So 6. 7 holes, and we'll want 2 more holes. Now this, of course, I'm setting up to stitch these by hand. I have done cartridge loops on a machine before. I don't really like as much how they turn out. I prefer doing them by hand. If I was manufacturing this and really wanted to make a bunch of them and make money at it, I'd have to do it on the machine. But for just making 1 or 2 like I usually do, I'll just stitch these by hand. Now this big heavy piece that I'll stitch on is that stop. I'll go ahead and stitch that on with the machine, because I don't want to have to do that by hand. But we'll go ahead and mark that real quick with some with the stitching groover, and I'll get it stitched on, and then we'll get to hand stitching those. Alright, now my usual method for stitching cartridge loops. Instead of saddle stitching them, I do something very similar in the long run. I'm going to start in a hole in the middle, work out to the end, all the way back up to the other side, then back down to that hole in the middle again. And that locks it all in and holds it really well, and it looks like a saddle stitch when you're done, but you don't have to have a whole bunch of little pieces of thread that you're constantly starting a new piece of thread for each of them. You could put 2 needles on each end of a whole bunch of pieces of thread, but this way I don't have to thread the needles as often. So they're all stitched on there now. I'm going to go ahead and wet this down and go get some shot shells that I can put in there to shape it. And we'll also shape the fold on these whenever we've got it wet down as well. I'm just going to leave this all natural. I'm not dyeing it any colors. Otherwise, I would have done all that before I stitched it together. But it's just going to get oiled up and finished up in a natural color. All right, it's all wet down. Fold it in half. And I find that if you curve it a little bit, you can get a better crease on that. Plus, you want it to be kind of a little curved to start with, because the human body's always got more of a curve to it than straight lines. So when it's on somebody's belt, it'll fit a little better. Now you can use regular 12 gauge shells in these. These are 2.5, 2 3/4, whatever they are. So they don't stick out much. A 3-inch shell would stick out a little bit more. But I have these really cool Magtech shells that are all brass, that are set up for cowboy action shooting loads, that are just going to look awesome in this. So we're just going to go ahead and use those. And those again are 2.5-inch shells, or just shy of it. So a 3-inch shell would stick up to about here and be easy to grab. These shorter shells, you kind of have to push up on the base of them and pull them out. You can also, if you don't want to deal with live ammunition, or even make your own dummy ammunition, you can get snap caps that are sized to fit the chambers on various things. And you can get 12 gauge snap caps and just use those in place of ammunition. The last thing we need on this before we call it done really and let it dry up is we need to go ahead and set some snaps. And for that, I'm just going to use some line 24, some big heavy snaps. We can also finish up our edges and, like I said, oil it up, but we got to let it dry before we oil it up. Let's go ahead and get these snaps on there. This leather's just a little thick for these snaps, so we'll see if they stay together. Seem to work. Okay, let's put our shot shells back in and let this dry. Okay, so I've had a chance to finish this up. It's been a day or so and I've let it dry all the way. I put a clear coat finish on it. And I did take on these edges and put some gum tragacanth on there and slick those nice and smooth. But otherwise, that's all I've really done to it to finish it up. It's a pretty simple project. Now, I've seen these used by mostly cowboy action shooters, the Single Action Shooting Society guys, for reloads with their shotguns. But I've also seen hunters use these because sometimes, depending on your local laws, you're not allowed to have your shotgun loaded until you're out at your stand or you're a certain time of the day. So they'll carry their ammunition on a belt slide like this and be ready to load up whenever they're out in the field. But it's a quick little project. It'll fit on up to about a 3-inch belt. Works best, I think, on about a 2.5-inch gun belt for Western style gun belts, shooting, single action shooting, cowboy shooting. But it'll fit on just about anything smaller than that as well. Or standard 1.5-inch belt will fit just fine through this. You can either feed the belt through or you can unsnap these snaps on the back and re-snap them once you got it in place.